Regular ARB meeting for Thursday, January 16th. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Chair Liebert.
Present.
Vice Chair Pop.
Present.
Board Member Liu.
Here.
Board Member Malone Pritchard.
Present.
Board Member Guyer.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is the time when members of the public may speak to any item that is not on today's agenda. Do we have any speaker cards? Okay. With that, we'll move on to minutes. We don't have any minutes. Any agenda changes or deletions? None. There is a item number 3 that has been removed from our regular agenda, but that's been noticed. So we'll begin with major review. Item number 1, 2209, 2215, El Camino Real, request by Karen Kam on behalf of Tai Ning Trading and Investment for major architectural review of a new 9,580 square foot 3-story mixed-use development on a 5,204 square foot lot to replace an existing 3,803 square foot restaurant and retail use. Environmental assessment exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Act per guidelines section 15332, zone district CC2. Would you like to introduce the project?
Sure. Good morning and Happy New Year. The request is to conduct a major architectural review of a new 9,571 square foot 3-story mixed-use development on a 5,200 square foot lot to replace an existing restaurant and retail use. The project would include ground floor financial service, second-story office space, and third-story residential. During the November 21st, 2013 public testimony was given by a speaker who noted her concerns about the level of environmental analysis and the lack of on-site parking. The ARB provided input and continued the public hearing to the December 19th hearing in order to allow the applicant time to finalize the parking layout and address comments by the ARB regarding the design. Subsequently, the meeting was continued to January 16th because of a noticing error. The ARB also requested additional information and provided suggestions on how to improve the design. The applicant has incorporated all the suggestions into the project design as noted in the staff report. I'd like to highlight a few main points. The rear elevation was refined with material detailing and has been redesigned to better hide the parking view from College Avenue by adding landscape elements and other visual barriers along the northern edge of the site along College. The project no longer includes vertical tandem parking spaces, and the parking area has been redesigned so it is screened from public views from College. The second and third floors are now proposed to be supported by stone-clad columns by additional structural support and to create a stronger support system. The terracing balconies facing Cedar Lane are proposed to be supported by steel tubular columns which ground the structure while maintaining a sense of lightness in the upper levels. Additional attention to landscape elements and material detailing has been included to make the north elevation more welcoming. The parking space layout now meets the parking design requirements. A total of 24 vehicular parking spaces would be associated with this development. 6 of these spaces would be located on site. The driveway to the ADA space would be accessible from College Avenue. The 12-foot wide curb cut on College Avenue would still provide access for 3 off-site parking spaces. The 6 spaces would consist of tandem arranged residential spaces and 4 commercial parking spaces, including handicap accessible at the rear of the property. Staff analyzed the project with respect to historic status, traffic, cumulative traffic, noise, air quality, and water quality, and determined no impact or less than significant impact in every case in which the project would be exempt. Therefore, staff was able to determine, based on review, there would be no impacts in the subject areas, and therefore an initial study negative deck was deemed unnecessary. Staff recommends that the Architectural Review Board recommend approval of the project based upon the findings and conditions of approval contained in the attachment. And that concludes my staff report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant like to make a presentation? You will have 10 minutes.
Testing.
It's okay.
Good morning and Happy New Year. Once again, we are glad to be back, and throughout the past 2 years, we want to say thank you for both the staff, Amy, Margaret, and also this board, prior members and current members for many good suggestions and pointers.
Could you introduce yourself? Just
of
your
course,
name?
and we believe we should have incorporated a lot of those. This is Calvin Kam, also my sister. I'm Calvin Kam. This is Yan Ping Wang. We represent the owner, the concept designer, and also the ultimate end user of this building. So I think what we would like to present is to quickly remind us about the site, which is 2 blocks away from California Avenue and El Camino Real, and we pay close attention to the architecture vocabulary along El Camino Real, and especially in terms of retail use and some of the mixed use, in terms of also what kind of a citizenship, what kind of architecture vocabulary we want to bring in. At the same time, we also do believe that we are making a positive contribution with the existing being a 3,000 square feet restaurant and also a 250 square feet lock shop in the existing sites. Do want to also remind ourselves where the building is located and situated. It has a very strong corner condition. We do propose to let the ground floor either be retail or at the maximum for a bank use, which is also very consistent along El Camino Real. We propose the second floor to be an office, third floor to be residence, and we do intend to move back to Palo Alto in this case. And also what is behind us, it's actually an opposite to us, a church and institutional building. So even though Central Lane, it's really quite a chaotic condition in the existing sense, with alley, with a blank CMU wall facing us, but what is happening behind the wall after us is actually an existing church building. At the same time, on the other side, it's also opposite to another institutional building. So you can see that our latest design, we try to incorporate lots of the very good feedback from this board, and also one of them being what is our back condition. Even though, as you can see behind us is such an existing blank wall, which the church is facing us, but we do want to also plan for as good a rear facing as we could that is sensitive to that side. We did hear a lot about some questioning about the total, simple, modern touch to the building. We did go ahead along the College Avenue side, bring in some of the kind of like a softer touch and also a clad, in this case, with more wooden kind of like mix to it. So in the existing case, you can see some of the perspectives. As you can see, we also want to have a different language and dialogue with El Camino Real being a very busy and active street. Many of the concerns have been around the parking situation, and since our last presentation to this board, we did meet with the Palo Alto city staff, including the traffic engineer, and want to confirm and also pick up a lot of the good suggestions. One thing that we want to remind all ourselves is that we are within the California Avenue Assessment District, so 18 parking has been priority assigned, and also the fact that currently it's a full restaurant use, and with the mixed use and all the requirements, it fully comply, as you all can see in the detail, with the parking requirements set forth by the city. There is an existing curb cut, and we're actually moving the curb cut south a little bit in this case. So I think in discussion with the Palo Alto City staff, we also are finding out that in fact we are also providing an additional safer on-site street parking this way. So there are more details in terms of how we came up with the parking requirements, but the other point is that this is a mixed-use building. so the load is not as dramatic as the west one period use. We also put special attention to the universal design. And so in terms of more on the college side, so even though that's a blank wall and a lot of chaotic traffic, we believe we are providing a more softer tone that translate back, and also added additional terraces that can have some green terraces towards the central lane side. And then facade, one of the key changes we have added is to add a tile, more like a stone wall on the ground level, and more of a wood or a clay type of siding on the second and third floor along the College Avenue. We also presented some additional details about how the clad may be per the suggestion, but we are really looking forward to fine-tuning a lot of those in the design development phase. And then in terms of we are also conscious about the location and the orientation of the sites. Being south and western facing, we did some energy analysis and also created additional light shelf, and also pay more attention with good suggestions from the board, looking into a combination of a frosted glass light shelf on the first floor, and also maybe more perforated metal on the second and third floor for the light shelf. So from the signage perspective, we do see that the opportunity is to also create, as the board suggested, in terms of a vehicular approach, kind of like corner condition where you can see the logo can be, and also in terms of street side and pedestrian, there can also be a language over there. We also took the suggestion to turn the corner condition and further celebrate that as an entry to the bank on the first floor. Second floor, it's an office space. Third floor, it's a 3-bedroom residence that we intend to occupy. And in terms of materials, we also study more precedents. We also brought in some samples of what we are having in mind, and looking forward to further define that in the design development phase. So also got inspired by some of the buildings on Stanford campus and also along El Camino Real. I think at the end of this talk, we would like to say it has been a 2-year journey that has given us a lot of uncertainty in terms of parking, in terms of design review. We understand that sometimes as each of you have a lot of good comments. So we really, and also the process that very often we may be submitting, but then a lot of the feedback were not really given to us until, in some cases back in November, 2 days before the meeting, about some of the car lifts and the like. In all cases, we took all those comments very seriously, go back to the drawing board almost immediately, and we do look forward to seeking your approval and with more certainty, so that we could invest in the design development phase. So with that, we would welcome your feedback and also are standing by for any questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, this is the time when members of the public may speak to this item. I have one speaker card, Tommy Derrick. And Mr. Derrick, you will have 3 minutes, and if there are any other speakers on this particular item, please get a speaker card into the clerk here. Thank you.
My name is Tommy Derrick. I live 4 blocks from the project. I have some issues with the size of the project. I clearly understand that it's within scope and being built to maximize profit. I have some issues with a couple of comments by the staff report saying that there are no parking or traffic impacts. This project is being approved with credit for 18 parking spaces that do not exist. There are not 18 additional spaces in the California Avenue garages. I've been here before, and I understand that you guys don't deal with parking, and I'm not asking you to do anything about that. But it's important to note that once again, we are looking at a project that is going to have a very negative impact on our neighborhood by its size and by granting spaces that don't exist. I don't know if it's within your prerogative, but it would be very worthwhile, I think, to discuss with this applicant the possibility of developing a traffic TDM, traffic demand management plan, whatever, to somehow try to mitigate the number of people that are coming. It is disappointing that staff has not addressed that issue in the report and simply glosses over what is going to continue to cause us to push farther and farther for residential parking permits. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Derrick. Any other speakers for this item? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing and return to the board for questions. We'll begin with questions. Board Member Malone Pritchard, would you kick this off, please?
First of all, did you bring samples? Yes, okay. Yeah, if you could bring those up, that'd be great. Thanks. First of all, I want to thank you for all of the changes you made. You obviously were paying attention to what we were asking for. So the corner signage, you have that tree logo. I assume is that just a placeholder, or do you really propose a tree there?
No, that's actually a Palo Alto. That's your city logo. Exactly, because we do not know which signage may go in. That's a proposal.
Okay.
In terms of where the location may be.
So can you describe to me how that would work to have a sign there on a curved facade right at the corner?
It's actually we do propose to there should be some offset in terms of a metal frame to hold it up, and so that should be cantilever from the existing structural frame.
Okay, so it projects outside the curve. Another thing I think we discussed at a prior hearing was that the business next door to you on El Camino has a row of upper windows right along the edge. Can you describe to me how you've addressed that?
Yes, in fact, Ms. Karen Kam actually met with that neighbor building, the Allstate building, and actually went up to them, and maybe I'll let her summarize that meeting.
Yes, about around November, I have met the owner of the Farmers Insurance, one of the partners, the lady, and their concern is that they would like to have privacy. So they don't want to have any windows from outside that can oversee their windows, because they have a lot of confidential information. So what she wants to make sure is that we don't have any windows along just close by. So and as long as the back set, because we have some for the parkings, we have some space up there so the lights can let in. So they say that that's fine. So far we go along very well with it. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. That's all I have for questions.
Vice Chair Pop.
All right, thank you. First of all, question for staff. There's on finding number 9, under the attachment A, it talks about sufficient ancillary functions are provided to support the main functions of the project, and the same are compatible with the project's design concept. This finding can be made in the affirmative, and that the ancillary functions are consistent and compatible with the project's design concept. Just like to understand what the ancillary functions are. Is there a description, or if the applicant wants to weigh in here? I don't quite understand what we're referring to.
Well, ancillary functions is pretty broad. It can mean the parking. It can mean trash.
Okay.
This kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. That's fine with me then. And then in attachment G, let's see, I have a note about policy 48. I just have to go look and see what my notes were. Oh, right. Policy L48. Attachment G, this is like the second to last page in the packet. promote high-quality creative design and site planning that is compatible with surrounding public and development and public spaces. And the consistency review comment is the proposed development reflects modern architecture which will be compatible with the various styles of the neighboring buildings. And I guess particularly in light of all the recent discussion about what is modern architecture, I'm wondering if we might alter that to just be contemporary. I don't think this is an example of modern architecture necessarily. And then, let's see, I just have a couple quick questions for the applicant. First, I note in some of your drawings, particularly the details on A16, you're calling out that the metalwork is painted red, and then on some of the elevations, A19A and A21, it's white. And so I think looking at the renderings, your intent is that it's white and that's just a remnant from an, okay, perfect. I was going to ask you for a materials board, but we have it here. I think maybe now is the right time to ask you to do this for us. It's great to see the materials, but you've labeled them in the drawings, W1, W2, et cetera, and it's hard for me to understand which is which. Do you want to give us a quick explanation of what these materials are and,
Sure.
and where you're intending they're applied on the building?
Would you like us to do it now?
Yeah, that'd be great. Come, maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
just come grab them and
Go ahead.
tell us which ones are which.
Sure, should I just come up?
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't think it's on.
There's a switch on the bottom. Come here, I'll give you a hand. I think it's on the bottom.
It only broadcasts, it doesn't. Oh, there you go. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you have to use the mic.
So the materials that we're intending to use, we've brought some samples of both the S1, S2, and W1. So at the base of the building, which is the sort of row of planters that kind of wraps around the entire El Camino and College Avenue side, we're thinking of looking at a darker stone material. These are all made of clay tile, but they're inkjet printed and imported from Italy. And then on the upper levels for S1, we're looking at something that looks more, it's the same tile material, but in the image of travertine, and this kind of lighter color here. For the W1, which is most of the vertical wood siding look, we're using this, which is W1, that's the same material base for maintenance purposes and for that it'll never deform or look or change in its appearance, but it's this wooden kind of texture and color, and that's all we have.
And what is this
for
one?
you today? Oh, this one is I guess this one and this one are two examples of S1, and then that one is S2, the darker one.
Okay. So in addition to those, on your finished materials legend, you also have an S2 for stucco wall and an S3 that is a darkened limestone panel. I think that the S3 is the one you're referring to as the one that's got some texture on it there, right?
Yes, that's S3.
And so is there stucco wall?
No, we've eliminated
Okay,
that from the,
all right.
that's in the latest drawing set.
Okay. Great, that's very helpful, thank you. Did you bring samples of the metal finish or any of the
No, we
aluminum?
weren't able to acquire that in time.
Okay,
Sorry.
all right, that's all right.
Okay,
That's great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Board Member Guyer.
I don't have any questions at the moment.
Board Member Liu, do you have any questions?
I do. I have a question for the applicant about the your stair tower. So the glass canopy above the stair tower, and so I was wondering if you could explain that, because we don't have any details for that, and I did want to check with you if that does meet all of the like code requirements for
Yeah.
fire ratings?
I think we must admit that that is a part that, that as we were trying to get the submission ready, we were not able to fully design that yet. It's not going to be a glass canopy. It's going to be just and it may not even project, that's the maximum height. We'll be looking into whether some of those conditions can take place, the indoor-outdoor condition can take place at a half a flight lower or something like that. But so conceptually, it's just an access to the roof, and but it will not be a glass canopy.
Okay, good.
And those are activities we would love to refine once we move through today's milestone.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Ms. Neto, could you just, for the sake of Mr. Derrick, could you just sort of reiterate and go through how the parking was established? Because I know we've been struggling with this for a couple of meetings, and I want to make sure that that's been addressed. I have the text here.
Sure. The parking was established by, there's a table in the staff report that has the square footage for the financial, which is 1,979 square feet, and required by code is 1 space per 180. So required spaces for the financial part would be 11 spaces, and the office on the second floor is 3,408 square feet. And for office, the requirement is 1 space for 310. So 11 parking spaces would be required. And for residential, 2 spaces are required. So a total of 24 parking spaces would be required. And as noted, they have 18 parking spaces in the California Avenue Parking Assessment District. And so they are providing the remainder spaces, the 6 spaces on site. And that's how it's being parked.
Okay, so the building was previously assessed and paid into the parking assessment district, so it's not as though this building is being built and it's void any spaces.
Correct.
Okay, and then just quickly for the applicant, with regards to your materials here, did you look at any other types of tile, other than sort of simulated stone and wood?
We do. In fact, I want to make one correction in that on the ground level, it will not be simulated or synthetic tile. It will be tile. But then on the second and third floor, when you see where pedestrian and the occupant are not that accessible, we are more thinking about maintenance and leakage. So that's when, yes, we may want to provide a softer touch to it. We are also looking into what may be synthetic or composite materials that can offer both the aesthetic but also the waterproof feature. To answer the question, yes, we are open to looking into alternate materials. So far, we have not engaged professional. So far, we have not engaged the architects of record, the engineers with them all aligned. But as you can see, we have a 2 years process getting up to this point. So we are waiting for that certainty and fully would like to take it as a starting point and look into the best value. In addition, we are also going to be working closely with the city to look into whether we could add more photovoltaics or solar panel to make this building not only be compliant but be more sustainable. So the short answer is yes, we are open to material at or better than these options we're presenting.
Yeah, my question was, did you look at any other patterns, I guess, to the tile other than simulated stone or simulated wood? Were there any other tile patterns that you'd looked at?
Not yet. So far, I think the reason why we picked the stone for the first floor, it's because we want to provide this mass and this consistency with a lot of the language along El Camino Real, and also the fact that it's kind of like a busy street, so we believe the stone could provide us with that foundation experience. The second and third floor, we see that because of the function being mixed use, we do want to soften the touch, so that has been our direction so far.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Okay, we'll return to the board for questions and comments. Board Member Malone Pritchard, you'll have 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'd like to start with the findings. If we go to attachment A of the findings for architectural approval, there is a finding number 4, which it refers to areas considered by the board as having a unified design character. I would state that this particular area does not have a unified design character, so this is not an applicable finding. And in finding 5, which is transitions in scale and character in areas between different designated land uses, the different land uses should also mention the nearby R2 zone. And I think that's addressed by their having the balconies and open areas at the backside, which are recessed. So it's a little bit less massive on the back of the building. Finding number 12 in that same section has to do with construction and plant material. There's no mention of plant material in the response to the finding. So we should include plant material as part of the materials that will add interest. Moving to attachment B, the context-based design considerations. Number 2, street building facades. We're supposed to be providing a strong relationship with the sidewalk, and I believe this building is doing that through glazing and planting. It's not just the sidewalk width. And item 5 in that section, project open space, should mention that there is open space on the upper levels for the building occupants. And then finding 6 I'm having a little trouble with because this says the project provides parking in the rear which does not detract from the pedestrian environment, but in fact we now have a driveway off College for the accessible parking. So be interested in what the rest of the board has to say about that one. So if I have any time left, the material samples that you brought, I was surprised to see the wood sample or the simulated wood sample looking so light in your renderings. It had a really warm tone. It looked rich and warm and pleasant. This, I think, is really going to wash out and not have that soft touch you're looking for. And I'm not comfortable with the corner signage. I think if you have a curved corner, you should celebrate that curved corner, and putting something flat in front of it is in conflict with your whole concept. So I'm not in support of that particular sign location. And then on the lower signage, the one that reads Financial Center right now, it seems to be placed at the right height for a sign, but the fact that you have it recessed into the building, I'd like to see it worked into the architecture better so that perhaps the banding aligns better with your recess. I think that needs some more care. And that's it for this round.
Vice Chair Pop.
Thank you. Okay, so picking up on a couple of questions still, just looking through some of your details. Can you tell me, please, the upper planters that you have, how are those to drain? What's your mechanism for controlling where the water will go out of those?
We have looked into options of how, for example, for how other projects have articulated that. So, for example, we could, like in this case, add a planter box on top of it so that it can, in addition to the normal building and the waterproof system. So, and then that's how some of these examples that we see are done, so that we want to provide an additional planter box as one option to look into how we could not intrude to the existing waterproof system.
So I very much like the idea of the planter boxes, and I think that's going to add some nice character and an interesting level of detail to the building, but I'm concerned about the actual management of the water and how you're going to irrigate those is easy, right? You have drip lines that feed water into that pressurized system, but where does the water go when it drips out of those? How are you going to manage that? Do you have a upper level drainage system? Are those, I mean, I don't see any downspouts on the building. I don't see any leader lines. I'm just wondering how you're managing that.
So some of those may go along with the column locations, and of course I think so that isn't that one of our approaches.
If there's a wall section detail where it shows the drainage concealed inside the columns, so it kind of comes in, the pipe goes from where the planter sits on the second floor slab, and then it'll kind of drain into a pipe that goes inside the column cover and down to the ground.
Did you see? Which one? 19. Okay, that's great. Thanks for considering that. And then let me just ask on your lighting plan, the fixtures that you've selected, these tall, thin fixtures that have a translucent panel on the front of them and essentially just project light straight out from them. You know, there's a couple of different varieties of these, but they look like they generate about 5,000 lumens each of light. It's intense. And I have to say I'm very concerned about the glare that creates as you're driving down El Camino and looking at the corner. And it's important to promote a safe environment, and I want to have illumination on the sidewalk, but we have street lighting that does that. And I guess I'm concerned that the lighting that you apply should be more focused on accentuating the character of the building and enhancing the aesthetic of the building. And my concern is that the lights that you've chosen will actually create like a cloud of glare that will make it so that you can't see the building at night. A recent example of this that I would give you is the Village at San Antonio Shopping Center. They've just put up a whole bunch of lights like this, and it is terrifically unpleasant when you drive through there. Really goose up your night vision, and it's disruptive. And so I'm going to ask you to consider shielding that in some way or finding a different type of fixture that manages that. I think there's also some night sky compliancy issues that you might want to look into and make sure that you're satisfying that as well. I'll echo the comments made by others about some of the materials, and I'll just take a little further than Board Member Lippert here, who talked about other tiles that you might be selecting. When you're talking about the finish that's at the base, the pedestrian level, and you use the word tile, are you talking about an actual stone, a natural material, or are you talking about a man-made material?
We're actually considering actual stone material for the ground floor.
Okay.
Be that, yeah. And then we are actually considering more composite or synthetic materials for the second and third floor.
Okay, so I know you've been in the process for a long time, and I have to say that I think that the building has come along very nicely. I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing today. I like the level of detailing that you're showing on your elevations. The challenge that I'm having today is part of our job here is to manage the aesthetic character and quality of the building. And without the actual sample materials that you're committing to today, it's impossible for me to move you forward. I just can't do that. And so I need to understand more about what your finishes are so that I can understand that they're going to function properly with the design that you're proposing. So I'd like to express clearly that I like very much what's gone on with the design. I think that the corrections that you've made have addressed my comments, and I feel like you're on a great track here. The challenge that I have is it's not quite enough information for me as an architectural review board member to solve this for you today. Okay.
Board Member Guyer?
Yeah, let's see, on a couple of the things, I have to agree, the first thing that popped out of me was that flat sign on the corner, I think needs to go. I don't like that at all. I like the various solutions you've done. I never did like the lift system for the parking, so I think you've come a long way. The interior circulation has improved greatly as far as getting to the third floor, the residential area. I think the biggest disappointment at this point is seeing the. It's nice when a designer comes in and is willing to use all kinds of good materials for the finishes, but the problem is in bright sunlight, almost every one of these things is going to look beige. And I mean, you're really not going to tell the difference between something that is simulated wood, although it does answer my question. I was wondering why wood on the property line. Well, this pretty much answers it, that you can do that, but still. I think you're missing a big opportunity to, the whole concept of having sort of a base on the building, but the reality of it is that base really is almost no different in color than the upper two floors. I think I think you've come a long way, and I'm willing to move forward at this point, but I think the color selection on the exterior finishes need to be enhanced, let's put it that way. That's it for me.
Board Member Liu? I do have a question for staff about the parking. Mr. Derrick mentioned the TDM idea, and so I just wanted to get clarification for you. My understanding is that usually the TDMs are required when an applicant is asking for parking reduction, say like if it's in the California Avenue district, right? They could ask for like a 10 or 20% reduction on mixed use projects, and it's within proximity of transit. But is it, my understanding is that they're not asking for that on this particular one?
That's correct. They're not asking for any reduction because they had that previously assessed 18 spaces provided in the garages. The requirement for TDM is typically associated with when somebody is asking for a reduction, or when there's a concern about an increase in trips reflected by the change of use or the additional square footage. In this case, we don't have either situation. So that's why we didn't impose a TDM requirement.
Great, thank you. And then for the applicant, I just want to say I think that you've made huge progress since in the last 2 times that we've seen this project, and I think generally I'm perfectly fine with the partie of the building. I'm willing to sort of recommend that the project move forward, but I do think that there are things that should come back to the board in some way, if it's subcommittee or consent calendar. But I think definitely materials, and also I think some of the landscaping. I mean, I think some of the planting and hardscape, like the pavers at the entryway, I think should come back, and then also whatever you're changing at the stair tower up to the roof. And then I think I would want to also see maybe like the actual perforated metal sample for the mechanical screen. And I would also want some clarification on the mechanical area that you're showing up on the roof is very, very small. I mean, sort of unusual for this type of building. So I would want sort of confirmation that that's actually what.
Yeah, our early research is that given the size of each of the zone, it's only about 1,000, 2,000 square feet. A lot of those can forget about big building system by using more of the ductless system.
Okay, good. I think agree with all the other board members about the like lighting and signage and all of that, and I think that's fine. I think those are relatively minor. And then I think just also too, I want to comment on the materials, is I think I would want to see, because if you do use primarily like these simulated tiles, is that I think I'd want to see some indication of like the pattern, particularly of the wood. So like, for example, like on a lot of like the porcelain tiles, like for the wood ones, they're not actually long 7 foot, 8 foot long planks. They're actually like 3 feet long. So I'd want to see if you could do like at least a partial elevation, something a little bit larger. If you do use that kind of like a wood-like one, I think I'd want to see that a little bit more carefully. If it's just a regular tile, rectangular, whatever stone panel, then I don't really care about that so much. But it's really when you're trying to, like in your elevations, really trying to strengthen, like your elevations are showing a very strong vertical pattern, and it seems to me that's kind of hard to do with what I know of, like porcelain tiles. I'd want to see more information on that kind of stuff. But generally, I think the project is looking much better than your previous schemes, and I think it's, you're on the right path at this point. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you. This has been quite a journey, and I appreciate your persistence in staying with the project. I want to begin by saying that I think that this is a pleasant addition to El Camino Real. It will have, I think, very little difficulty blending in along El Camino Real and with the other buildings there. I really like the facade that you have along El Camino Real as well as the adjacent street there. I'm a little bit ambivalent about the corner. Okay, I like the way you wrap the corner, but it's a very weak sort of element here. And what you've done is you've created this corner where you enter the ground floor, off of it, and it doesn't have any strength to it. It almost gets lost. In some ways, the entrance off of El Camino Real has more strength than this corner. And so I think that needs a little bit more work. And what I'm looking at here is that on the side street along College Avenue, you've got some vertical elements there that are very strong, but yet at the corner they sort of fall apart. So I think that needs some additional development. But you've really come a long way in terms of this project and have done a really great job listening to our feedback here. I'm in agreement with Board Member Pop that we really need to see a real material board. You need to take this and cut it down and make some boards and even show us, the glazing as well as the material that's going to be used for your overhangs as well as your windows. I think that's important to see all those materials together and how they all work. The difficulty I have with the tile building that you're presenting here is because of the texture and the fact that it's tile. It isn't as successful, I think, on a vertical surface as it is on a horizontal surface. It isn't that it can't be done. Where the problem is that because it's a tile, it has no dimension to it. And so corners become very important as to how this material is going to read dimensionally around corners, how it's going to make the transition where you've got the curved surface. How are these all going to work together so that it doesn't feel flat and segmented? And so I'm a bit apprehensive when I look at a simulated wood or simulated stone being used, in a tile application. It's a lot more successful as smaller pieces that are not simulating stone, that it reads as a tile building, because then you can really work with tile and how tile goes together rather than how stone goes together. So I think mitering the corners is going to be particularly difficult in this case, and I think it's going to come off reading as flat and artificial. So that's why I think it's important to see material board as well as maybe some tighter details and renderings, I think, in this case. And then the last comment I have to make is I think your residential floor is a little problematic. If you look at the bedroom layout for it, I think it works. I don't have a problem with that. 3 bedrooms, I think it's great. Having a great room in there, kitchen, whole works. But it comes off as being a little bit like a residence hotel or some sort of, I don't know, hotel type space. I mean, you look at bedrooms 2 and 3, and they all have their own little bathroom. I don't have a problem with that. But it's a little too modular. And so where it becomes a problem on the exterior of the building is where the mullions and where the walls line up. How are we going to get those walls and those mullions to work seamlessly together? So what I was thinking, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I'm not telling you how to do the interior because we don't have any purview there, but I would take bedrooms 2 and 3, turn them 90 degrees, and put them where bedroom 1 is, and that will get that off the back of the building, and then move bedroom 1 to really where bedroom 3 is located, and have it be a little bit more amorphous and a little more asymmetrical in terms of how it's laid out. I think it's going to feel a lot more home-like and less like a residence inn, type of situation.
Quick response is that we like that option, would like to explore that. The only reason we went this way is so that they all get a view towards not the alley, but towards college.
Yeah, I understand that. My concern is how are these going to read on the outside of the building? And that's where my big concern is. So with that, you want to make a motion? Mr. Vice Chair Pop?
Sure, I'd like to make a motion. And I'll start by saying that I'd like to recommend we approve the project based upon the findings and the staff report with the following changes. You want me to run through what those are for the findings? Did you capture those, or I'll just do that. So in finding A, number 4, that the unified character is not applicable. Finding number 5, the transition should mention the R2 zone. Finding 12 should mention plant materials. In attachment B, number 2 should mention the strong relationship to the public way, including the glazing and the planting. Number 5 should mention the upper space, the open space at the upper floor. I didn't quite catch number 6, what you were describing there. Could you just clarify for me about the
Well, there's
parking?
an issue that we have, not just parking in the rear, but also parking on College. So we are actually affecting the pedestrian environment there.
That's right. Okay, great.
So,
thank you for clarifying. And then in attachment G, policy L48, altering the description of that, the architectural style. And then the following items to be returned to the subcommittee for further review. The color palette. And I'll be specific here in saying that we want to have manageable samples of the skin materials, whether that's tile or stone or metal, whatever glass samples you have. If there's perforated metals, we want to see all of those, please, and the colors that they're going to appear in. We'd like to have some detailed elevations of the pattern for those materials. That you reconsider the sign at the corner, and as an overall concept, integrating the signage in a more effective manner. That we get more detail on the landscape and the paving patterns. That the lighting be reevaluated, different type of fixtures so that we don't have the glare issue, and understanding what your intent is with the redesign of the stair tower. And I think that's everything.
Do I have a seconder on this?
I'll second.
Okay. Board member, Vice Chair Pop, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I guess just in response to your comments, I actually think that the way the unit is laid out is appropriate. I'd prefer to see all of the residences having a view out to College than looking out into the alley. And I believe that the way you've got the building laid out right now works well with the elevation, and it's not our job to tell you how to design the interior. I respect Lee's comments. He's a terrific residential architect and understands these things well, but I think that from where I sit, I like the way the outside of the building looks right now. Don't want you to go back and changing all that. Let's just try and keep moving forward.
Board member Guyer, do you want to speak to your second?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Board member Liu?
I have a friendly amendment, which is to, just in the standard conditions of approval, a lot of times we require the final landscaping and irrigation plans to be included, and I didn't see that in this particular packet. I'm just saying that, the regular boilerplate that is normally in here, in applications.
I'll accept that.
Board member Guyer, do you accept that?
That's fine.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I'd like to add a friendly amendment to have details of the guardrails come back, because I see in some places in the set it's glass and in some it's metal.
Do you accept that?
Sure do.
Board member Guyer?
Fine.
Okay, that's great. Okay, and then I just want to add just a friendly comment here. I think that it's important to address Tommy Derrick's public comment as to how we arrived at that parking number. He really should understand that the underlying building that's there already has paid into the assessment district and that they've provided those additional parking spaces. And so there is no net deficit in parking here. I think it's important to address members of the public that bring such an important issue forward and be direct about it. We're not providing any relief here in terms of parking. Okay. Okay, so with that, let's all vote on the motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that's 5-0-0-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I want to say thank you once again, and we look forward to returning to the subcommittee with those feedback.
Great. Thank you very much.
Staff, of course.
Okay, with that, we will move on to item number 2, 2609 Alma Street, request by CKA Architects on behalf of Valley One Investments, LLC, for preliminary architectural review of a 3-story, 4-unit multifamily residential condominium building on an 8,063 square foot site in the RM30 zone. This is a preliminary. We will not be taking any action on this item today. So with that, would staff like to introduce the item?
Yes. This is Russ Reich's project. He is out today, as you've noticed. The project is a 4-unit housing project. There are 4 apartment units on this site currently, with 2 ownership parcels. And so the project is to provide 4 condominiums. And part of the issue on this site is the existing parking spaces are provided in such a way that they're non-conforming. They're located within the front setback. And so the tear down and redevelopment of the site is required to conform to the current standards. And for that reason, the parking is placed on the site behind the setback front. And therefore, there is a need to their response to the site constraints is to place the parking on the ground floor in a structured parking because the covered parking is required. What this means is that the upper floors, start at floor 2. The ground floor for the living area is floor 2, and therefore they're a taller, multi-story building. So this is kind of in contrast to what's out there adjacent, and so I'll let the applicant kind of show their PowerPoint, which I think improves upon the packet that you received, and then entertain your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. You will have 10 minutes to make your presentation. If you wouldn't mind, please just introducing yourself and anyone who's going to be speaking to also introduce themselves.
Great. Thank you, Chair Lippert and members of the board. My name is Chris Coomer of CKA Architects in Menlo Park, and I'm here with Sean Wang of Valley One Investments, the owner of the property at 2609 through 2617 on Alma Street. So as we know, Alma Street's a busy street with 2 high-speed lanes of traffic in each direction. Here's our parcel here. Everything on our side of Alma is zoned RM30 or RM15, as you know. And then on Emerson Street, there are 1- and 2-story residences. The buildings on both sides, on Alma and on Emerson, are either ranch style or mid-century modern style. Across the street from us is the Joint Powers land with the Caltrain, and then we've got a 3-story office building coming up here. It's also important to note that the Caltrain station is 0.4 miles away. So our site and this whole area on our side of Alma Street is a transition zone between larger buildings and the El Camino Real sort of corridor, and then the residences beyond, the Midtown residence beyond. So in terms of our site here, we've got single story with a couple of 2-story apartments here to the west. And then, as Amy said, we've got 2 parcels here. And then immediately to the right of us is a low apartment. And then beyond that are 4 2-story apartments. The frontage is quite large. It's about 10 feet of planting. It's really in a state of disrepair, as are most of the buildings on the street, as you know. Nothing's really turned over here, it seems, since 1950. Behind us, actually on the left of us here, we've got some mature screening. These are deciduous, and there are some evergreen trees on the left as well. And then behind, you'll see there's quite a large stand of trees. This is our property here. You can see the non-conforming parking. An important point, I think, is that you could not recreate what's going on here today. The parking doesn't conform. These things back out on Alma. The turnaround is in the frontage. And you'll see when you drive through this area that the frontage is just stacked with cars. And so our project has really been designed to accommodate the parking on the site, as Amy mentioned. Here's the neighbor to the left. They've got 5 units. These are these large deciduous trees. You can see somebody parking here. Neighbor to the right, they're parking in the frontage. Here, they've got only 2 parking spaces. If this were to be rebuilt, they'd have to do 4 plus an additional guest space. Here are the 4 units to the right. Excuse me. They've got 5 units and 5 parking spaces. Again, that doesn't conform. So the status quo here on Alma, just in terms of parking, cannot be continued. Any new development would really have to do something to respond to the parking concerns. So this is our project. We've got 4 townhome units. You'll see the parking in garages beneath each unit. There are 2 buildings. They're separated by an alley here. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is another view showing a screen on the left-hand side, and there are quite a few trees here on the left-hand side for screening. The daylight plane had some impact in the design. Because there are only 2 units on the right-hand side, we have a more restrictive daylight plane on that side. And because there are 5 on the left, we have a more generous daylight plane there. Parking on the lower floor, living, and then sleeping on the upper floor. It's important to note that everything in this project also conforms with the zoning ordinance. We're not asking for any exceptions. In terms of the layout, it was important for us to have an individual sense of entry. Each unit sort of has its own access front unit access to the front. These two share an access in the middle, and then they separate to their own doors, and the rear unit has its own access. They all have private yards along the west here, and then we've created a common space at the rear. Because this will be governed by a condo association, we've got some common space at the rear neighboring the residential neighbors. We're trying to also use the driveway as a pedestrian access. See these little red arrows? This is trying to design the driveway in such a way that it would feel comfortable to walk to the units. So the little hatched area would be impervious paving, and that would make a little path to the units. And this other area would be pervious paving, helping us keep some of the water on site and create some interest in the driveway. One of the important things we'd like to do is upgrade the street frontage. You'll see out there it's quite mixed. We'd like to irrigate and plant some nice plants. We're getting rid of a curb cut, and we'll only have one instead of two. That should really help out there. And we're incorporating some biodetention and an entry that's visible from Alma Street. In terms of the environmental response, we're trying to welcome the eastern sun here with a lot of glass on the eastern side, trying to block the western sun to reduce the cooling load. The eastern sun will help us with daylighting and some passive solar strategies. We've also, because the units have openings on three sides, we can take advantage of passive cooling and cross ventilation, stack ventilation as well. The wall at the front is designed to be a little bit more solid to mitigate the effects of the noise, the traffic, and the pollution. The driveway on the right is a buffer between us and the neighbor to the right. And then we've got some screens on the left that help block the sun. That's the western side, and also create privacy from that neighbor. And finally, we're going to be planting, screening at the rear. That's what we proposed, and also screening on the left to help with privacy concerns. The rear unit also has high windows so that you can't see out them to the residences on Emerson Street. Here's some of the ventilation strategies: just stack ventilation, cross ventilation, maximize the eastern sun, and we've got a low slope roof. It's a perfect opportunity for photovoltaics. They're facing west. In terms of the design, we're trying to create an articulated side here, the most visible side, the driveway side, with some interest, and a kind of more solid wall in the front, as I mentioned, to block the effects of Alma. We also wanted to make it so that the units were individually discernible, so you could sort of see each one individually. You'll see that in the rendering. We also tried to employ a rich use of materials with natural cedar, 2 colors of stucco, some aluminum windows, porcelain tile at the base, and sort of a cement color. And then we tried to extend some of those into the landscape, so a sense of the building with stucco walls and wood walls becoming fences and whatnot. We did a little shadow study to see the effect of the building, and we're pleased to find out that from this study, it didn't really affect the neighbors on Emerson too much until the end of the year, December 21st, the winter solstice, when all the trees and everything just would shade those homes anyway. Here's an example of some of the materials we've chosen: natural wood, a couple colors of stucco, some dark windows. This slide shows the evolution of our design. It was first conceived of as sort of a monolithic building with some bay windows and the parking below. We broke it into 2 buildings and employed the angled bays. And then we further articulated the roof so you'd see each unit individually. And then finally trying to marry sort of the articulated side on the right with the wood screen side on the left, marry those across the front, ending up with a design like this. So here you see the screen on the left continuing across the front. We've got this articulated side that wraps around the front, maximizing the good sun here, clerestory windows for ventilation and light, bringing the elements into the landscape with a low wall. So all in all, we think it's a balanced proposal for development here. It makes a nice transition between the busier areas across the joint powers corridor. It's a nice place to live near Caltrain, and it makes a nice transition to the residential neighborhood. And really, as I mentioned before, the status quo can't continue here just because of the parking. So we're trying to address that, have a sensitive proposal that meets all the standards and doesn't have just sea of parking on the frontage. All right, I look forward to your comments.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we will open the public hearing. I have 2 speaker cards, Debbie Coleman, followed by Jonathan Cranch. If there's any other speakers, please get a speaker card into the staff member. So, Ms. Coleman, you will have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Debbie Coleman. I live at 2536 Emerson Street, which is about 4 units to the north and behind the proposed units. I have lived there for 38 years. No, that's not true. I've lived there for about 30 years. And basically, I have a 1-story home, raised both my kids there, don't plan on moving. And this is totally out of step with the rest of the neighborhood. The residential neighborhood behind this proposed development is all 1- and 2-story homes. Directly behind there is probably 4 1-story homes. I'm in a 1-story home. My neighbors on both sides are 2 stories, but they have kept to the daylight plane, and they're neighbors. These people this proposal is just too high I understand that parking is an issue, but if they put 2 stories on top of parking, it makes it a 3-story building. There's no other 3-story building near us. I think the first one is at the new building at what used to be Alma Center, behind Mickey's. But those are set back, and there's no residential behind them. So I'm really concerned that this is setting a precedent, that we're going to end up having knockdowns and 3-story buildings put in front of us. And basically, it's too big for this area. This is a residential area with people raising kids. This looks right into our backyards. And I just think it's way too big. Thank you for considering.
Thank you. Jonathan Cranch. If there are any other speakers, please get your speaker card in.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Jonathan Cranch. I live at 2520 Emerson Street, which is right next door to Debbie. In years gone by, the ARB stood as the protector of the neighborhood. In addition to conforming to setbacks, square footage, building footprint, and lot coverage, many other elements of a project were considered. Mass, window location, materials, many other criteria, in order to keep with the character of the neighborhood. Even when the project was well within zoning restrictions, projects had to pass this hurdle. This board was constantly trying to protect that neighborhood character. Now it seems the emphasis is reversed. You are considering a massive structure that seems to build out to the very limits of setback and daylight plane with a nondescript design that only says mass and bulk. A 3-story building in a neighborhood where there are currently only 1- and 2-story buildings. If you approve this monstrosity, it's only a matter of time before this new project sets the precedent for replacing the current genteel neighborhood with more of the high-density, uninspiring rabbit warrens that lack character and architectural interest and increase the already heavy traffic on Alma. Instead of protecting the character of the neighborhood, it seems now that this board is allowing just the opposite, introducing the very non-conforming elements that could eventually alter forever in an unfavorable way the very character of that neighborhood. I thank you. And by the way, I would challenge the 4/10 of a mile from this project to Caltrain. It only works if you're a crow. If you have to get there on foot, you have a much longer way around. You have to go down to the park, around under the underpass, and then come back to the train station. So I just would challenge that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cranch. If there are any other speakers, please get your speaker card in. I will leave the public hearing open.
Can I just mention that there were some letters that were sent in? I don't know if they're at places. You received them. The speakers aren't here today, but we do have, just for the record, that has been forwarded to the board.
Okay, and I also should state that this is a preliminary hearing. We are not taking action. We are commenting on the project only today. So, oh, please. Board Member Lewis.
I just want to disclose that I talked to the applicant on the phone to discuss whether or not to have a meeting in person, and we did not have a meeting in person.
Okay. Well, since you started, why don't you ask your questions, and then we'll come back for comments.
I have a general question, zoning question for staff. So I was looking at the zoning map for Alma, for this whole section, and it seems like half of the block is RM30 and then half of the block is RM15, and I couldn't really figure out, like, I mean, it all looks so similar to me, like the stretch along Alma. I mean, I can understand that there's a theoretical proximity to transit, which might bump up half of the block to RM30, but I was wondering if you had any insight. I know you're not a historian of all the complexities of our zoning code, but if there was any, I don't know if you had any
I was
thoughts about
definitely
that.
born after the creation of the zone here. I've been here a while, but not that long. We can certainly, in the report that comes back to you, should the applicant come forward with a formal application, there can be some more history there. We do have some old zoning maps, and there are public records for why things were done back in the day. So that would be back in the 1960s, perhaps. It may have been an earlier version of that type of multifamily. But it is multiple family residential in the comprehensive plan. So it's not low density.
And I have another general question just on our context-based criteria for multifamily housing. So I think there's like one diagram in the zoning manual that says that the massing should mirror what's adjacent, and then it can step up and follow the daylight plane. And I was wondering if there were other examples as well. Like, I've been thinking just in general that this project looks somewhat similar to other infill projects that we've had in the downtown area. But at the same time, the downtown area is much more mixed in height, and this area is really predominantly one story. And so it seems to me to be sort of pushing the limits of the context-based criteria.
Yeah, I mean, the context-based criteria, of course, is trying to respond to edge conditions and give some guidance there. This is an area that hasn't seen turnover, as the speakers mentioned, the applicant mentioned. So it's one of these, it's the first of potentially others to come forward. And so what is it going to look like along this corridor? It is a busy corridor, and if it were not for the one-story single-family homes on the rear, certainly the width of the roadway, et cetera, would lend itself to perhaps some taller structures. But we do have to be cognizant of the context, and stepping is generally the way the zoning code context-based guidelines recommend addressing that situation.
And then I have a question for the applicant. So I was wondering what other, I mean, just say like just schemes had you considered? And I was thinking just off the top of my head, I was wondering if there were any that were oriented more front to back, as I'm thinking yours is kind of like rotated like 90 degrees. I was actually just thinking that the, Alma is such a high traffic and it's so noisy. I walked around the whole block and stuff, and Emerson and Alma, and it seemed like if I were like choosing to like purchase a condominium, I would want some sort of relief from living on such a busy street, and like the idea of having like a backyard or whatever would mitigate it. But on this one, really, you just have like 9-foot side yards. There's no deck. There's no anything, and that we usually see that on other infill projects that we've had in the downtown area. There's more private open space than what you're showing in this particular scheme.
Let's see, how do I get here? So we've got these, to answer your question about the yards first, these are, not postage stamp yards. I think they're quite nice for a tight site like this. I can try to get a dimension here. But we're looking at 20 by 9 for each unit, and then you walk up the stairs, and then they've got a balcony there as well. So there's a little bit of space there. We're trying to make that feel somewhat generous, and again, there's a necessity for a common space. We're trying to provide that in the rear. Now, like I mentioned before, the parking really drove it. If we tried to turn the building 90 degrees, that we just don't have the width for it. And so that would be one strategy if we had more lots, to turn the building, put the mass on the Alma side, and try to have a quiet back, as you alluded to. That would be great. But unfortunately, unless we were given a variance for parking, I would find that difficult.
Board Member Guyer, you have questions?
I don't have any questions at the moment.
Vice Chair Pop?
You are first out of the gate on this. It's a tricky one, and clearly, I think the issue of creating a new paradigm here is challenging. In terms of other options that you look at, what Board Member Liu was describing occurred to me as well. I'm wondering if you looked at any other formats, such as tuck under parking, or any other concepts that would help to push the building down.
Yeah, that the tuck under parking came up right away, and because of the tightness of the site, it's quite a challenge just to get down. Even to ramp down and get to a half level down is a challenge. So we did look at that. Because we could make it conform here and make it work. We've got a daylight plane on the rear. That's a residential daylight plane. And we also have, that's the same daylight plane they have on Emerson for their homes. We were pleased that we could get it to conform. But we did look at kind of pushing it down, and those challenges, there's so many challenges with actually having then land that's usable, that's not dominated by stairs and ramps and that kind of stuff. It started to really come apart quickly.
Okay. It clearly conforms, right? And I think that's the challenge here for me, is that we have a project that conforms to the zoning, but it's clearly out of character with its surrounding buildings. I think that the zoning that's in this area has been in place for a long time. People who have homes on Emerson have to understand that they live next to a different zone, and it's a different density, and it's a different set of rules. And there are things that come out of that.
It begs the question how this area is going to evolve. I think we can all agree that it's pretty run down now. Nothing is turned over. And so, I'm kind of a broken record on the parking standard, but with the parking standards the way they are.
I mean, cars drive a lot, right? They drive a lot of the design. It often occurs. I don't have any other questions at this time. We'll come back to comments.
Board Member Malone Pritchard?
So I guess my first question is, you've got that big front turnaround area. Is that strictly for the guest parking? So they back all the way down the driveway and then turn?
Yeah, that's something that came up in our review with the different departments, is that we felt that the guest parking had adequate turnaround to actually turn around back there. The point was made that large SUVs may not be able to make that turn, and so we're trying to use something like the drivable grass, something soft, so that those who need to turn around can do that there.
And then I know you're also subject to the special 24-foot setback, but just looking at the diagram of the neighboring buildings, it looks as if some of the other buildings are further forward than that setback. Is that correct?
I don't, just visually, it seems to be that way. The parking seems to be set forward. But that's not something that I have here in paper form. That would be, I think, interesting for us to sort of diagram.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting study, because the first thing that occurred to me was that there's a lot of space used in the front for that turnaround that isn't really benefiting very many people.
Right.
If you could separate your building, either pull the whole thing forwards a little bit to give a bit more breathing room to the R1 zone, or separate the two buildings enough that you could get your turnaround between the two buildings. That would also give more buffer to the residential in the back, because they wouldn't have a car parking right at the end. So all of those would require some level of exception. I don't know whether that would work, whether it would be acceptable, but I think it's worth looking at.
Can you clarify, so having the guest parking in between the two buildings, I understand that.
Yeah.
Or trying to have it, what was the other location?
That was the only other
Oh, okay.
location for
Yeah.
the guest parking. 'Cause
Right, yeah, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
That would push the building,
that would push it
the back
closer
building,
to...
closer to the residences in the rear. Yeah.
No, I was thinking you just take the front building and push it towards the street.
Oh, well, that would be great. We do have that special setback. If we could get some
Right.
relief there, that would
But
be
again,
great.
that's a whole exception process that
Yes.
may or may not work for you. But by doing that, you would be taking away the parking space at the back, which is also an impact on the residents. And Amy had something to say.
I'll just jump in. When we say exception, what we mean in this case for special setbacks is a variance. So that would, have some exposure to the Planning Commission. Having said that, I think the special setback itself is an interesting topic that needs further exploration at this point, because the reasons those were put into place years ago, need to be examined, I think, again. And see what we're working with here.
Yeah, I think that does need to be examined on a more global scale, because it affects all of these properties, and it really is driving the design back towards the R1 neighborhood, where you don't really want the 37-foot height limit.
I have a couple of questions. Your rear yard setback is 10 feet, but you show the building, is that at 20 feet?
Close. We show the building at 18. That's 18. Correct. So we're 8 feet away from that.
Okay. And then with regard to your, you have a lot of diagonals in this. You have the diagonal of the roof, and then you have the diagonal of the bedrooms coming out, and in some ways they undulate. Did you look at having them all lined up in the same direction to sort of organize things a little bit better?
Let's see. So the diagonal on these diagonals, the bays that are on the parking side, we did not look at having those go the same way, but that's a possibility. They're just the flip. These are just the flip of the unit, but we could just flip the bay. So that's an interesting thought, yes.
Yeah, I was just, I'm looking at a way of organizing and simplifying, I guess, is what it is. It's a little, I guess, disjointed is what I'm looking at there. Mm-hmm. And then on the north side yard, I was looking at your elevation. It looks a little austere. You're looking at people, entering the buildings, or visitors approaching through that orange door, and then they would walk down down the side yard there. Is there a way to make it a little more interesting?
Are you talking about the rear entrance or the front?
The rear entrances.
I
don't know which is the front. That's my confusion.
Okay, so let me see if I can clarify that. This door here,
is the front door.
Well, is the front door for the front unit.
Okay.
But you open it up and you're outside.
Okay.
And then you walk up an exterior stair, and then you go into a door to your unit. So that's the entrance sequence there.
So I'm a visitor to the other units. How do I approach those?
You have to individually approach those. We had, For the middle units, you'd walk down the driveway, again in that fashion I was describing, trying to have a little bit of paving that was obvious, that sort of led you down. And then you'd walk in between the alley and go to those units. And then the rear unit, you'd walk in the back. So signage also would have to help them, the visitors, find those units.
Okay, what I find is a little, I guess, I think to use the word troubling is a little strong, but if I were in that first unit against Alma Street, I would be very concerned about everybody who's visiting, my neighbors knocking on my door. I do want a presence of something there,
right?
But, you know, and something strong enough, but I wouldn't want that dedicated to just the first unit. I would want them all to be equally as strong so that there's no confusion as to which unit I'm in when I'm in the back unit there, you know, that my friends can find me.
This is something we were working on with Russ. He was helping us try to understand how to provide a sense of residential entry on the front. And you know, so we saw that as a good thing, just making this look like somewhat of a residential building, right? But I see your point about finding the other ones and having everybody come to this door.
You know, it might very well be that you have one single entrance, just like you do at a normal apartment building, and you walk down, you know, between the units, and you find the right apartment, and that's the way you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the way you do it.
Right.
I'm thinking of, we just recently visited Charleston, South Carolina, and it's not uncommon to have a portico or a gate that looks like a front door right on the street. You enter into a little loggia or court, and then you find the appropriate door to the front of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
That would be possible here. You know, if we were to work with some of the yard spaces differently.
Okay. So with that, are there any other members of the public that wish to speak to this item? Okay. If not, I'm going to close the public hearing for now, and we'll return to the board for additional questions and comments. Everybody will get 5 minutes. Board Member Liu?
So I did want to follow up on Board Member Lee's Lippert's last comments about the you know, the entrances, and I just wanted to point out, you know, in the comp plan it really does say that. Here, I'm going to paraphrase, but it says like the design and arrangement of new multifamily buildings, including entries and outdoor spaces, shall be designed so that each unit has a clear relationship to a public street. And I think what the weakness that I'm seeing in the scheme is that piece. And so like going to your two middle units, going down this long slot between three-story buildings, just is not, I mean, it's fine for San Francisco, but that doesn't work here. I don't think we can do that. I compared your project to 4 or 5 other recent projects. We have 557 Lytton, which is 4 units on a 9,500 square foot lot. We have 145 Hawthorne, which is RM15. That's 3 units on a 10,000 square foot lot. And then we have 2 RM30 projects on Homer, which are 3 units each. And so those are on like 10,000 square foot lots typically, and there are like typically 3 units and 2 stories. Really, the only one is Lytton, which has 4 stories and is 4 units and 3 stories. And I'm thinking that this is just too much mass on the site, and there's really not enough ground floor connection of the units. And I'm thinking, thinking out loud, what if there were 3 units and there were nicer units, and there was more space between the units? Some of the projects that I mentioned have 1-car garage and 1-car outdoor parking, and that's allowed, I think, by our zoning. Right? You have 3-bedroom units, you just need to have 1 of the 2 spots covered, and that's also a possibility. And I think, too, then if you break up the massing more, you'll be able to step the building and to have like parts of it could just be 2-story, and then the rest of it could be 3-story. So it helps make the transition between your project and the 1-story projects that surround surround the property. And then 2, I think, you know, regarding the private open space, I think, I think the hard thing is that like your like the private yards really aren't that accessible. They're not really that accessible or usable. I'm thinking of most of the projects that we've had here in the downtown area have had sort of that indoor-outdoor space where the living area spills out onto like decks and stuff, and that seems to me the right way to go. I think that the open space here is like a little disconnected from the units, which isn't quite so desirable in my mind. And then, so I think that's where I stand on this. I'm not quite set on the general scheme of the project, but I do really welcome the reinvestment in the area. I mean, the existing conditions are really horrible. I think that some sort of new typology is warranted for this area, and we're just going to have to, figure out what's acceptable to the neighborhood. You have a lot of neighborhood opposition at this point, and we're going to have to figure out a way to get around it. We have lots of new multifamily projects downtown that have fit in really well, and they look great. And I don't see why this can't happen here on this particular parcel. I mean, I think it's time that it happen. The Emerson, I walked down Emerson, it's a really beautiful street, really high quality and consistency, and I think that needs to happen on Alma as well. That's I think all I have to say at this point.
Board Member Guyer?
Yeah, I pretty much have to agree with all the various the comments that you made. Is just that when you look at this and the development of it, it looks like from an architectural standpoint, you covered all the bases, did all the right things, but the conversation keeps going back to if I had more square footage or if I had more land, everything else, it's just too much. I don't think a three-story building in this particular location at this time is appropriate. I mean, one of the things we're asked to look at is context, and this just does not fit. And in the written statements, I agree completely that this is the first time in 50 years that anybody's been doing anything, but. I've had enough experience sitting on both your side and my side in situations like this. If you're the first one on the block to do something, you don't max the thing out to the extreme all the way around and then figure people are going to be happy with that going, ooh, look what the future is bringing. I think if you're going to be the first one on the block, you have to sit there and go, well, okay, if I get sort of 70% of what I'm looking for, I have to be the first one to start that. Then if that goes well with the neighborhood, then maybe the next time they'll accept a 2.5 story. The time after that they'll accept a 3-story. I don't know. But just immediately coming out, I'd be horrified if I lived on Emerson behind this a 3-story building like this. All of a sudden, I'm thinking about the fact that my property. Is about 7,000 square feet, and I've got one small, 1,400 square foot house on it, and I still think the property is small for the house I've got on it. Here, I've got 4 units on 1,000 square feet more. I mean, just looking at it in that context, it seems huge. And you run into problems like that. As you said, I agree that. Everybody's going to go to that nice, shiny, bright orange front door and assume that that's the entrance to all of them. Even the examples that you gave on A5.1 for possible looks are all large projects in what looks like downtown San Francisco, or at least some relatively large downtown area, and they don't really even just the. I'm not saying that I don't like the architecture, it's just the architecture itself speaks to size and is designed to be something that is a 10, 20 unit apartment building rather than condos. It just, it doesn't have anything going for it in the sense of trying to tone it down and make it look residential in a 1-story, 2-story neighborhood. I could go on, but I think You get the gist of what I'm talking about.
Vice Chair Pop?
This is a tough one, you know. I think that it's clear that there is some significant resistance to the inevitable development that is going to occur along Alma. I think the challenge for you is that you are the first one, and you have to strike a balance between what is there now and what is coming. And you know, the criteria that we are asked to evaluate projects on, and I'll quote this, is to promote orderly and harmonious development of the city. And this jumps outside of that box in a very difficult way. The perception of height here, the overall mass and bulk, is difficult. And while I'm not adverse to your design per se, I don't think that, I'll say clearly, if you had a whole series of 3-story projects around you and you proposed this, I would feel very differently about it. But because of what it's surrounded by today, my reaction is different. And I think that the description that you've given of the evolution of the design was very helpful, but I didn't see any suggestions of something that was more subdued, more minimal, and I think we need to see that. You know, I'm gonna recommend that you look at using a lower roof slope. I'm going to look at, you know, less verticality in some of your elements. You know, really do everything you can architecturally to diminish the perception of bulk and height here. I don't know quite where you are in terms of your allowable FAR and your proposed FAR. Amy, is that studied yet? Did I just miss it?
We've changed our format for preliminary reports, so we're just not saying as much. But there's something on the plans there.
It's on A1.1 there on the left side.
Oh, right, okay.
So we're meeting the floor area, but you're at the maximum of the floor.
Right. So, you know, I think a lot of the comments you're hearing are about this absolutely maxes it out. I think you've done a good job of fitting within the daylight plans and respecting the setbacks, and you know, that's on a normal project, that's a difficult challenge, and you've done fine with that. But on this particular project, I think that it's just not working for me. I'll also point out, I think that there's in the elevations, there's a very oh man, I don't know how to say this. Well, on the rear elevation, let's just go there for a second on A4.2. If I look at the garden elevation, the west side elevation, over on the last unit in the back, there's an element of the building that projects beyond the roof form, and that's not reflecting in the rear elevation. And so I think even that will tend to exaggerate the height. You're going to have this big, tall, 3-story wall at the rear, directly facing the most sensitive area for that height. And so stepping away from that, anything you can do to try and diminish the perception of height here, and to control how your mass and bulk are spread across the site will make a really huge difference. And come back to us with your evolution. You know, really do that. I want to say clearly, I really appreciate that you came forward as a preliminary. I think in many cases it's very helpful. In this particular case, I think it was critical that you did it this way. And so I appreciate that, and I want to recognize that that's an extra effort that you've gone to, but I think it's going to pay off in the long run. Thank you.
Board Member Malone Pritchard.
So looking at this project in a vacuum without looking at the context, I would say it's a very handsome, lovely project. Needs to have a few things worked out. The problem I think you're hearing from all of us is that context is a really big part of what we are charged to review. And as others have said, you're the first one out of the gate. If there were other 3 stories around, you'd be in a much easier position. So typically what happens when you are the first one out of the gate, and even though you're conforming to zoning, I see you're not even hitting the height limit with your design. You're below it, and you're respecting all the daylight planes and really not pushing it too far as the zoning regulations. You have 1-story buildings all around you. So you need to somehow do something to respect those lower buildings. Really go back and read what our context-based requirements are and try to do something to lower this. I'm not saying the whole building has to be not 3 stories, but if parts of it were not 3 stories and those parts were appropriately located to make a transition to the adjacent properties, then I think you'd have a much better project, or more approvable project.
Do you feel that the transition is as necessary to the RM30 neighbors on the left and the right? To me, the transition is more necessary on the rear, obviously, than on the sides. This is a 2-story on the left. It's a little bit hidden, but they have a little second floor up there. Our thinking was that the left and the right neighbors eventually are going to turn over. They have the same zoning regulations. Would you agree that the onus is sort of more on the rear than the sides?
I would say that the rear is much more sensitive, but the way our rules are written, we do also need to look at the sides, because even though they can eventually go to 35 feet high, they're not there now.
Thank you.
And the one other thing that did jump out at me in reviewing this initially is that to get to the back 3 units, you have to go past a sea of garage doors. So I agree with other board members that you've got an issue with that individual finding units, the wayfinding. But love your detailing. Obviously, you're going to design a beautiful building for this location. It needs to be, you need to step back a little bit and think about your surroundings.
Well, first of all, I'm going to thank you for coming forward with a prelim. It's particularly important, especially for neighbors, to be able to give you some feedback as well as us. I'm very impressed by what I see here. This is not untypical from other developments in Palo Alto. Most recently, as Board Member Liu had recognized, 557 Forest at Lytton, 445 Forest, most recently 405 Kirtner, and other projects on Hawthorne Avenue that I live not far from, and they all abut R1, 1 and 2-story single-family houses. I see that we have a imperative in Palo Alto to provide high quality, more density in terms of housing, and you fit within all of the development regulations. If I were to take a single family lot, an R1 lot, that has a daylight plane that's basically a tent with a 35-foot height limit. It has a 20-foot rear yard setback. And here, and it allows for a moderate amount of encroachment into the rear yard setback. You have complied with the development regulations, and this, even though it is the first one on the block, really has the potential for setting the standard for a new profile on housing along Alma Street. If this were along any other street in Palo Alto, we would not be having this discussion. Alma Street is a marginal neighborhood. And when I say it's a marginal neighborhood, these are mid-century, 1-story carports, basically, that you're driving along. And what this begins to do is to set the tone as to what this neighborhood can be. Ultimately, with electrification of rail and Alma Street changing its profile over the years, this has the opportunity of being a buffer to the R1 neighborhood and actually protecting it. It's a bit daunting to see, a 3-story building in the middle of a sea of 1-story buildings, but ultimately this is a game changer and will change the whole feeling and the whole character of Alma Street. And so while I, hear my colleagues' comments, ultimately I see here a vision for the future, and I'm very excited about it. Your use of materials, I think, is appropriate. I think that the way you've structured the form here in terms of the ground floor and the recesses for the garages, I really like the way you've lined up the joints for the garages and have the garages recessed in there. The only thing I'm troubled by is how you find each of those units, and they all have the same weight to them. And it's a little, I guess, forced to have people walk down a driveway to find a space in between 2 buildings to then find the front door. It's almost, almost a rat's maze in a way. So I would encourage you to look at how you might be able to arrive at those entrances a little bit better. And then also, I think a little bit more relief, a little more predictability in terms of the facade. I don't like the undulating form of the bays. I think if they were all sort of normalized and they were all sort of facing in the same direction and there was a reason for it and it had to do with sunlight or getting light into the units or view or some other attribute, I think that's a real opportunity there, and it shouldn't just be arbitrary. And then the last thing is with regard to your monitors or your clerestory windows. I don't know that they have to be that tall. You might be able to regulate those a little bit more so that you have occasional bump ups, but I don't think that they all have to do that. Maybe if your roof form responded a little bit more to the sun and you're able to work some solar into it, that might be appropriate. So again, thank you very much for coming forward. Vice Chair Pop, you had one question for staff.
So Amy, obviously the 24-foot special setback along the street is a historic element in the regulations. Is there contextual setback that they could apply here? Here's where I'm going, okay, is we're saying to them, you fit the zoning, everything is just fine, it's a completely approvable project from all of those perspectives, but it just feels too big. And so in asking them to push down or do something different, is there any opportunity for a path to some flexibility in terms of front of the building where it's not impactful on the neighbors, it's similar to what other projects on the street have currently that would give them a larger footprint to start to work within? What would be involved in bringing the building farther forward because of all the context?
Right. As I mentioned, a variance is the only method to encroach a building into a into a special setback. It's different than the standard zoning setback. I believe the intention of special setbacks in town was the widening of roadways at one point in time. So, that's an area to explore, as Claire Malone Pritchard pointed out, on a more global basis. Why are we persisting with all of these special setbacks? Are we going to be widening the roadways or not? And that was kind of a 50s think technology, or let's make wider roads so cars can go faster and there can be more of them. Nowadays, we're looking at narrowing roads and not widening them. So I think there is room for discussion on a larger level. However, on a case-by-case basis, such as this, we would have to, they would have to submit a request for a variance, and of course, there would have to be findings of special circumstance in this particular site, and that's a little harder to do. So we're kind of in a conundrum there. We do have the context-based guidelines, so those can be used.
Would potentially the context of having all of these other frontages extending beyond the setback be enough of a finding to maybe?
I mean, I think the applicant can explore that and look at, what the conditions are and come forward with a variance if that's of interest. It just does call for a bigger process. The easier thing would be to reduce the size of the units. As noted earlier, one car, enclosed garages, that relieves some of that mass.
Yeah, if we're thinking about a vision for what Alma is going to look like, and this is the first one out of the gate, and it's a great example because it fits the zoning. But the impact on the neighbors behind, balancing, I completely agree with what Lee said, right? There's this concept that these really could create a buffer from the impact of the train, and it really does help to transition the intensity of El Camino down toward the neighborhood, the R1 neighborhood, and having this as sort of the last line of defense before you hit the neighborhood is valuable. It's just a question of how big should it be, and if we start to push these back deeper into the lot and really clearly make the design challenging, it seems like something's got to give.
I think there's more room for considering, as mentioned, a two-story development. That's a transition from one-story to two-story. Perhaps there's something that can be done with encroaching into the rear setback with a one-story element, this kind of thing. I mean, there are other ways of doing this that the applicant could look at.
I'd just rather have them come forward rather than go backward.
I understand. Yeah, it's just that it exposes them to a different process. Planning Commission, review upon request.
It's tough because they're the first ones, but maybe the right thing to do. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm in agreement with Board Member Pop's comments here. The setback, the special setback for Alma Street, I think it's preferable that the buildings actually come forward in this case and that there's more space left towards the R1. It's still functioning the same way as a buffering. Alma Street actually has, between that and the Southern Pacific Railroad right-of-way, it has the ability to support coming forward at that point. Whereas as you get closer to the downtown and the Alma Street narrows and everything becomes more constrained, there's less of an opportunity here, I think, to eliminate the special setback. So that's just my 2 cents. Any other board members wish to weigh in on the special setback? Board member?
I just think we should just say that there are people, even on the Planning Commission, who feel very strongly that the special setback should be adhered to very strictly. And then I think on my end, too, I just wanted to say that I think at this point, just looking at the site plan, I would not be willing to go there to reduce the setback. Just looking at the site plan of what I'm seeing here at the moment, it seems like all of the buildings most of the buildings actually have even a greater setback than that. So I'm not willing to go there.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, with that, we'll close the meeting. Thank you very much for coming forward with your prelim.
Great. Yeah, thank you for your comments.
Okay, so the last item we have on the agenda today is talking about the board retreat that's going to be on Thursday, January 30th. It's going to be a special meeting. It's going to be at 8:30 a.m. at the Lucy Stern Fireside Room. And you have in front of you a draft agenda, and I just want the board to go over this quickly and see if there's any other thoughts.
I think task reduction was discussed at the meeting on the 19th. The list of topics was noted as being potentially longer than could be handled in a morning, but I just throw that out there.
Well, I was looking at the retreat actually starting at 9 and ending at 1, but 8:30, I don't have a problem with 8:30.
Not advertised it yet. It will be advertised. The ad will be sent on Monday, so we do have some time to work this through.
How do board members feel about going from 9 to 1? Do you have any problem with that?
I'd rather start earlier.
Any other?
To me, 8:30 or 9 is about the same, so
Okay, then why don't we start at 8:30 and end at 12:30 then? You can come at 8:45. Okay. And then with regard to the 5 items here, what I was thinking of is that would give us 8:30, 9:30, about 4 hours there. Is that right? 8:30, 9:30, 10:30. Yeah. So we could at least, if we really focused in on this, we could probably spend at least an hour on each item. This is a retreat, so it's to have a discussion.
5 items.
I know, 4 out of the 5 is what I'm saying. So any thoughts as to what those 4 items would be?
I was, if you don't mind, I was going to suggest that discussing the procedures, I think, could be a very rapid discussion.
I agree.
Don't need an hour for that.
Okay.
And I think that the council annual letter also is probably a very rapid discussion, because essentially what we'll do is describe what our goal for that letter is, but I don't think unless I'm mistaken, I don't think we're going to have a draft of that letter or material we're basically going to be talking about what we want to have go in it, not reviewing it at that point. So both of those items, I think, are
basically the
15 minutes apiece or something,
Time, yeah.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll dedicate the first 3 items, we'll give those each an hour, and then the last 2 items we'll give half an hour. Does that sound about right to everybody? That sound doable? And we'll try to be measured and abbreviated in terms of our discussion.
Good.
Okay? Okay, great.
Is there a comment on the order? Is it okay as is?
I prefer to get the discussion of procedures done early, so I would want to see that first.
Let's move the council annual letter discussion up to the front as well.
You want to move that up front?
Sure. Let's just get it taken care of, and then we don't have to reserve 30 minutes for it.
Away fairly quickly.
That's fine. So 1 and 2. Yeah. So 4 and 5 will be the first items 1 and 2.
And I almost might suggest flipping the whole agenda around.
I think
because if we can get through these other ones more quickly, it'll leave us more time for the meat of this, which is, how do others feel about that?
I think our primary task here is really building height sidewalks and build 2 lines. And if we don't get that done...
why don't we do that one third? Because if that one stretches longer, then we can abbreviate the other ones, rather than having it at the end.
I agree.
Good.
Everybody in agreement on that? Okay, great. Okay. So any other reports?
No other reports coming up. We do have an appeal of the Tesla sign exception, and I have to report out that we did go ahead with calling it an exception, despite the board's comments on that aspect. So we did consider that wall sign to be the material placed on top of the wall to be included in the sign area. So that goes on February 3rd to the City Council on consent calendar. Don't know if they'll pull it, but we might want to have a representative present.
I wanted to ask why the decision was made to do that.
Well, certainly the staff report will cover all of that, but it is past practice which is why we brought it forward as an exception, to consider material placed on the wall, rather than painting of the wall, to be part of the sign. It's a box that contains the sign. So.
See how it plays out.
I need a ARB representative to go forward for that meeting. Board Vice Chair
I'll
Pop?
volunteer to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay. And then anything else? No? Okay. With that, we are adjourned. There is a subcommittee meeting.